Robert Frazer became a star in the 19-teens, starring as the screen's first Robin Hood, and continued to star into the 20s before beginning to star in the Talkies. But during the 1930s, he moved back and forth between starring parts and character roles until 1936, after which he was strictly a supporting character actor. Why? Join me as I investigate. Robert Frazer was born as Robert William Brown in 1891 to John and Mary Brown in Worcester, Massachusetts. According to an interview he gave to the Des Moines Register in 1926, he read plays from an early age and even began gathering friends to perform these plays in his backyard. As a young man, he started getting cast in stock and rep touring companies. In the same interview, he candidly shared that he got stranded 19 times as a young actor and even once lived on one can of pork and beans for 3 days while on tour. But he never got discouraged and eventually worked his way to playing the title character in a tour of Ben-Hur, and then took over another role for Douglas Fairbanks. In fact, while he was acting in films between 1912 and 1917, Robert continued to frequently return to the stage and is credited as starring in Saramonda on Broadway in 1917 with Julia Arthur. I couldn't find exactly when he began going by Robert Frazer. He entered the motion picture industry in 1912 at Eclair's American Studios in Fort Lee, New Jersey. He already entered films as a star and made an auspicious debut as Jesus in 1912's The Holy City, winning a rave review from Moving Picture World. After starring in several more shorts at Eclair that same year, he played the screen's very first Robin Hood, the legendary Prince of Thieves. Robert was off to a great start and starred in dozens of shorts at Eclair before making his feature debut in 1915 in The Lone Star Rush at Climax. In 1916, he starred in several more features, including starring with Mabel Taliaferro in The Dawn of Love at Metro, before taking 3 years off from the screen to star on Broadway and return to the stage in other companies. When Robert Frazer returned to films in 1919, he was living in Hollywood and had married stage actress Mildred Bright. He first starred with Florence Reed and William Desmond in Her Code of Honor in 1919, but then took 1920 off from pictures again, I'm assuming to go back on the stage. Robert starred in several successful silents for the remainder of the 1920s, sometimes in his own star vehicles and sometimes as leading man to some of the most famous leading ladies of the decade. Highlights of his silent work in this decade include Without Limit in 1921, Fascination in 1922, and Jazzmania in 1923, both of which starred Mae Murray. Playing Dr. Ballard in 1923's A Chapter in Her Life, a Pollyanna-like tale of a little girl, played by Jane Mercer, that brings joy to all she meets. Playing a man who asks his friend to stand in for him so he can be free to work as a writer, only to discover that his friend has married a beautiful actress played by Bebe Daniels while using his name in the zany comedy in 1925, Miss Bluebeard. Playing a man that is accused of murder and tells his story through flashbacks with Alice Calhoun in 1925's The Other Woman's Story. Starring with Pola Negri in 1925's The Charmer, after which Pola told an interviewer that Robert was the greatest screen lover with whom she had ever played. Starring as Captain Matt Russell in 1926's Send Cargo, winning raves for his acting, with one critic calling his acting capital. Starring with Renee Adoree in 1927's adventure film Back to God's Country. And finally starring in 1929's The Woman I Love. Robert made his talkie debut in 1929's Careers, which also starred Billy Dove, Antonio Moreno, and Thelma Todd. He then starred with Gladys Brockwell in The Drake Case and with Lenore Ulrich in Frozen Justice, both that same year. Robert entered the 1930s, being top billed in the 1930 Western Beyond the Law, which also starred Lane Chandler. He then starred as sympathetic Dr. Romaine, who cares for William Farnham's alcoholic Joe Morgan in 1931's powerful drama 10 Nights in a Barroom. Next, he starred in a dual role in Two Gun Caballero, and then in the serial The Mystery Trooper, which also starred Blanche Mahaffey and Buzz Barton. While Robert mostly moved the supporting character parts after 1931, he did have two final starring roles in 1936. First, he starred as a mad scientist, Dr. Paul Gironda, in the action serial The Amazing Exploits of the Clutching Hand. Next, he played Boston business tycoon John Worthington, who spends more time making money than worrying about his family in the drama What Becomes of the Children. However, like I said, mostly after 1931, Robert was one of Hollywood's busiest major character actors, appearing in dozens of films over the next 13 years. Highlights during this period included supporting Bela Lugosi and Madge Bellamy in 1932's White Zombie, playing Commissioner George Hartley in Never Too Late in 1935, playing villain Fletcher in 1939's Navy Secrets, which also starred Fay Wray and Grant Withers, playing Clinton Lyman, who was saved by Captain America in that serial in 1944, and playing Judge Reynolds in 40 Thieves, also in 1944. While 40 Thieves was the last picture he filmed before his untimely death, a B-movie that he began filming in the 30s entitled Gun Cargo, which featured him as first mate Fred Winthrop, was finally released and shown on television in 1949. Robert Frazer acted until the end of his life. Sadly, he passed away from leukemia in 1944 at the age of 53 and was survived by his widow, Mildred. One source stated that one source that I consulted stated that had he not passed away, he surely would have continued acting well into his old age, moving from movies to television, and I agree. Another fun fact, apparently Robert patented an improved process for color photography. So we are left with the question, why did Robert Frazer transition from star to character actor a few times in the talkies? The most logical answer would be his age, as he was in his 40s in the 1930s. However, his age did not stop him from still being a Western hero in two talkies in 1931 and playing a leading man again later in the decade. I think the real answer is that Robert Frazer was an actor's actor, always willing to step inside each character and bring him realistically to life, no matter the size of the role. His 1930s starring roles were character in nature, and even if they were leads. When he reached a certain age, those roles usually were more supporting than leading in nature, but that did not stop Robert from giving some spectacular performances. Look no further than his unhinged villainous turns in White Zombie and Navy Blues. And of course, The Amazing Exploits of the Clutching Hand. While several of Robert's silents are sadly lost, there are some available to enjoy on YouTube, including Robin Hood, A Chapter in Her Life, Miss Bluebeard, and the Other Woman's Story. You can also find, thankfully, the majority of his talkies on YouTube as well. I suggest checking out The Mystery Trooper, White Zombie, Navy Blues, and his star turns in Clutching Hand and What About the Children. Robert Frazer was truly one of the finest actors that graced both the silent and sound screens and should be better remembered for all of his incredible characters, not to mention the fact that he was the first Robin Hood. What a talent, what a legend. I must thank my sources for this episode, IMDb, the Internet Broadway Database, the Des Moines Register, bwesterns.com, Trav SD at his blog Travelanche, Find a Grave, the Media History Digital Library for their digitization of Motion Picture Daily, and archive.org for their digitization of Moving Picture World and Variety. Please like and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the silent talkie career of the great Pauline Frederick. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.